Hello, guys. Welcome back to Barbie Unfiltered. Hope everybody had a great Memorial weekend. But Memorial Day is not about the weekend, although we love the extra day, but it's remembering the fallen. Which brings me to this story that came out yesterday, I believe, and I saw it in social media. I haven't seen it actually in the news. Kerry, an Army veteran, he was a patriot, and he was known for his Trump house. Rest in peace. He was beaten, brutally beaten because of his love for country and for being a Trump supporter, just like many of us. For me, too. I have a sign out there that says promises made, promises kept with a big face of Trump. And I have another sign here in my window that says Pritzker sucks. Could I also be killed or beaten while I'm watering my plants? Well, these people are crazy. He was killed by a leftist, same people who continue to use violence against Trump's supporters. Now, imagine if this had been a trans that was beaten up by a Trump supporter. It would be all over media. These people are crazy. This is so wrong in so many levels. But not a peep, no national outrage. Before we start, please hit the like button. Share if you want to, but mostly subscribe. If you like what I'm putting out, like I said, this is my journey. And as I continue, I get better and better. I'm actually looking for a backdrop. I like good critique. And somebody told me you need a better backdrop. So I'm working on it. So again, today's show is about narratives, accountability, corruption, and questions Americans were told not to ask. If you did, you were racist. You are conspiracy theorists. Oh, you Trump supporters, you MAGA people. That's how they treat us. From January 6th to government transparency to immigration failures to fraud investigations connected to political insiders. The American people are watching this play out in real time, and many feel like the truth keeps changing depending on who's in power. Another American family is grieving today, like many others, after a deadly crash involving an undocumented immigrant suspect. In other words, an illegal, because they like to change words around. And Americans are once again asking why preventable tragedies continue happening across this country. I can't say exactly why the borders were wide open and what were the Democrats' endgame here. There's been rumors out there that even the auto pen was used by Pocahontas. Everybody knows who Pocahontas is. Many Americans believe accountability never came from the leadership in Washington. We're still waiting for people to get locked up. Authorities say undocumented truck driver identified as some Marvin guy was involved in the deadly California crash that killed 2 people and allegedly attempted to flee the scene afterwards. Stories like this are fueling growing anger across the country, and God knows that I cannot stand it. And this is exactly why border security remains the number one issue in America, especially from legal immigrants like myself. Because, yes, I am an immigrant. I'm a legal immigrant and I'm a Cuban American. And I do support ICE. Sorry. If you don't like it, keep scrolling. The DNC recently released reports showing Democrats are losing support among Hispanic. You think? I've been saying this for years. When borders are open and policies negatively impact the very communities politicians claim to represent, eventually people notice. Same with the Black community. For many families, this is not political, it's personal. How many more lives do we need to lose? For many Americans, this is no longer statistics. These are funerals happening. The lack of accountability is disgusting, and it's killed American families on our roads and everywhere. Everywhere. That statement came from the Department of Transportation, and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration announced the launch of a new anti-fraud system called MODIS. A little late, but nevertheless, is coming. Replacing what officials describe as a broken registration network, vulnerable to fraud, shell companies, and unsafe operators. According to DOT, the old system made it alarmingly easy for bad actors to register as motor carriers using little more than an email, a name, and a physical address. God forbid we ask for ID, or where they were born, or where's your papers, anything. But in New York, you need an ID to shovel snow. Officials estimate thousands of suspicious registration number tied to fraudulent carriers may still be operating inside the system. Well, I'll tell you this. When I get next to a truck, I get away. I just don't want them near me. I panic. If we are on the motorcycle, I cringe. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy warned that the dangerous drivers and shell companies had been exploiting weak federal oversight for years, contributing to deadly crashes on American roads. The new MODIS system reportedly uses identity identification tools, including but not limited to government issue IDs. Oh my goodness! Facial recognition verification, biometric checks, advanced fraud analytics. For many Americans, this confirms something that they feared for years. Our roads, our borders, and our public safety systems were not being properly protected. Where did the money go? Now, during the Biden years, billions were spent under the name infrastructure. In reality, it was diversity programs and pet political projects. Americans were promised roads, bridges, and public improvements, but many are asking where all that money actually went. And while Washington argues about border security and public safety, here in our own backyard in Chicago, taxpayers are funding so-called Peacekeeper programs that are now facing serious controversy. One of Government J.B. Pritzker publicly funded, and us taxpayers continue to foot the bill. Peacekeepers have reportedly been accused of armed robbery and even attempting to order murders while in public custody. So they're basically hitmen. Think about that for a second. Americans being told these programs are about violence prevention and community safety, just like that organization who was funding KKK. Yet serious crimes allegations are now tied to individuals connected to those same initiatives, and taxpayers are footing the bill. This is exactly why public trust is collapsing all around us. Americans want accountability, transparency, real solutions, not political talking points while families continue to pay the price. Honestly, we should not be shocked anymore. The DOJ announcement surrounding the Feeding Our Future fraud scandal exposed level of corruptions that sounds almost unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now let's talk about Omar and the growing questions around this political connections, fraud investigation, and public trust. Amy Bach, I can't believe she was white, but she was the central figure in defeating our future scandal, made explosive allegations involving political relationships and influence networks tied to Minnesota political circles. In other words, many people believe everyone knew what was going on. They just looked the other way. I'm not a fan of Tim Walz, but because he's so white as white can be, I can only imagine if he had done anything. They would have came down on him and called him every single name in the book. Because every time somebody uncovers one of these things, that's what they revert to, the name calling. And the word racist already lost every power, if any, that it had. As investigations continue, Americans are asking how deep did this fraud operation go? Who benefit? Why does accountability always seem to stop when politics enters the picture? There are allegations claiming political figures ignore warning signs while massive amount of money disappear through the fraud scheme connected to the pandemic programs. Make no mistakes. The pandemic programs just opened a whole new door because they've always been stealing. But now it's just unbelievable. The pandemic just brought so much theft that you have to be an idiot not to be upset about this, whether you are Democrat or Republican. Guys, we're all Americans and we all pay taxes. Now, these are questions many Americans are asking publicly. Why were accounts allegedly being moved or emptied? Omar had a lot of money one day and then the next day she had none. Because you are a public servant and you should not have billions like all these people have. They have made their careers and their wealth in public service. Why are these disputes over identity records and documentation? Why does it feel like political insiders are protected? And every time these questions are asked, people immediately label conspiracy theorists. You a conspiracy theorist. You are a racist. Stop it. Don't ask any more questions. But Americans have watched story after story eventually turn out to contain at least partial truth. We know the Minnesota pandemic fraud case tied to feeding our future involved hundreds of millions of dollars in alleged fraud. Federal prosecutors called it the largest COVID fraud scheme in the country. Honey, we still have California, we still have New York, and we still have Chicago. And they're all going to be exposed. And while not everyone in any community is responsible for the crimes committed by individuals, many Americans are asking how much or how such a massive operation could continue for so long without any oversight. That's the issue. The issue isn't whether every theory was true. The issue is that Americans were told asking questions itself was dangerous. And now we are seeing it all over. And like I said, in California, Medicare, public aid, it's insane the amount of fraud. But when they're running for office, I remember them always using so-and-so is going to take your Medicare. So-and-so is going to take your program. So-and-so is going to take, especially people with kids that have special needs. You have to be mad Because if the funds are not there for your kids, for my kids, for our grandkids, it's because they stole it. They gave it away and they allowed it to be stolen. That's the bottom line. So those are all just political talking points. Oh, there's not going to be Medicare for our grandkids, and blah, blah, blah. The amount of money that they have stolen could fund Medicare for decades. Decades, guys. So it doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or you're a Republican. This is our money. We worked for this. I just don't understand why there's not enough outrage out there every time that these schemes are discovered. Which brings me to January 6th. And although Democrats constantly scream that Fox News is a right-wing propaganda, let me be clear. Those hearings were last week. They were the only one showing and airing it in full. Why did Biden issue so many pardons? Why were records deleted? Why were communications missing? Why do Americans feel like major questions remain unanswered years later? Well, not many Americans, the Republicans, because we knew that was a Hollywood production. Critics argue people do not delete records, erase communications, seek sweeping legal protection unless they fear future scrutiny over how the January 6th narrative was handled. It was nothing more than a Hollywood production. Americans continue asking questions about deleted Secret Service text, missing January 6th committee files, dispute over preserved evidence, Biden's pardons, conflicting testimony. The DOJ Inspector General report regarding FBI confidential human source. And again, why did so many people say that it was an insurrection? Because we had violence all over America. We all watched in real time massive riots across the country during the 2020s that caused billions in damage, attack on police officers, burned businesses, and chaos in major cities. What happened when the Dodge team came out trying to find all these scams? They started burning Teslas. I would think everybody wants to find fraud. No, 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 no. They don't. The Democrats don't. But yet again, many politicians and media figures refuse to call those events insurrections. So naturally, people ask, why were records deleted? Why were Americans mocked simply for asking questions? Why are major issues still unresolved years later? Why were pardons necessary if everything was fully transparent? But let's watch this for a minute. Let's watch this.
Yesterday, the House Subcommittee on Federal Government Weaponization, chaired by Ohio Representative Jim Jordan, brought forth witnesses who alleged they were victims of retaliation for expressing concern over alleged politicization and weaponization of the FBI. They've come under fire from Democrats who say they are not real whistleblowers. Journalist Michael Schellenberger wrote about the hearing, saying, FBI says it won't release January 6th surveillance video because it would show too many undercover government agents and informants. The FBI whistleblowers who testified before Congress today are not actually whistleblowers, say the FBI and Democrats. Rather, they are disloyal Americans who undermined investigations into the January 6th riot at the Capitol building in D.C.
That's just bullshit. bullshit. And then they have the audacity to tell us that, oh, you're not allowed to ask questions. No, you're not allowed to ask questions. You're a conspiracy theory. I can't believe that January 6th wasn't real. I believe it was real. Everybody saw it. But I believe that they were started by the same people. 26 FBI agents were there. And they did nothing? It doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up. It was a Hollywood production. Pelosi didn't call for extra security. We saw the video in her and her daughter in the limo. She had a moment of clarity, and she said it was her fault. She had a moment of clarity. Now, that video was shown a few times. You have to really go out and look for it now because nobody would put two and two together. It's almost like the media just doesn't want to give it to us because they want to continue this division. Make no mistake, January 6th was a Hollywood production. I believe that these people, these FBI agents, undercover agents, were among the crowd and they started the violence and they got everybody into it. They opened the doors to the Capitol and everybody just went in and it was a production. According to the DOJ Inspector General, 26 FBI confident human sources were in Washington, D.C., tied to the January 6th event. Some entered restricted areas, and at least one entered the Capitol. I believe it's more than one. Americans are asking if federal confidential human sources were present, why were people mocked for discussing the possibility for years? We also know the FBI had intelligence warning about possible violence before January 6th. Security concerns were raised beforehand. Questions remain about failures of planning a response. And yes, many Americans continue pointing the video footage involving security discussions surrounding the White House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. No shit, Sherlock. FBI confidential human sources present, concerns about censorship coordination, intelligent failures, deleted communications, conflicting testimony. Those hearings were all last week. You're going to have to go and look for them because you're not going to see anything on the mainstream media. It is sad, but it's reality. And with that, I am telling you, go out and get the footage of everything and what is it? Connect the dots. For years, Americans were told January 6th was a simple insurrection story with no deeper questions allowed. As more information continues to surfacing, including concerns involving federal informants, you are racist, you're a conspiracy theorist. Whether people agree or disagree politically, one thing is undeniably. Millions of Americans no longer trust institutions that constantly change the narrative while attacking citizens for asking questions. And until transparency becomes equal for everyone, regardless of party, the distrust will continue to grow. It's just that simple. I don't trust them. And those who do and swear by it, that's what they want. They are a propaganda machine and they have people brainwashed. Look at that gentleman who got killed for his Trump signs. They are brainwashed. They're Looney Tunes. We need to bring paddy wagons into neighborhood and start picking these people up because they are nuts. And I don't blame them as much as I blame the media. So with that, I'm going to go through a little bit of girl talk. My husband recently suggested I start listening to Carl Jung. And honestly, in this messy world of therapists and meetings and self-help books and everything else we search for trying to find peace, I'm starting to realize something. The answer to happiness is already inside our minds. That also means we have to retrain our brains. We have to stop living inside the constant noise, fear, and pain and overthinking everything. We have to accept that some children, family member, friends, or people we love deeply, whether they hurt you or me intentionally or unintentionally, may never come around. We may never get the apology. We may never get the recognition. Not even a simple acknowledged that mistakes were made and that love still exists underneath all the damage. And maybe that is one of the hardest truths of adulthood. But with that said, please know you're not alone. I have been through the ringer and back. But sometimes that is what feels comfortable, the chaos. And sometimes we set ourselves up. I'll be praying for all of us to finally let go, not in the shallow way, casually, but profoundly let go. To release the pain, the resentment, the expectations, and the need to keep reliving wounds that never fully healed. Maybe real peace begins with us. We stop waiting for closure from others and finally give it to ourselves. I know I am not the only mother or the only wife or the only human going through pain. We all have some sort of baggage. But sometimes when we have lived with that pain for all our lives and we are in survivor mode, sometimes we don't know how we could live without surviving. And what about if we don't have to survive anymore? We're adults. We only owe us our peace, even if we can't let go of the past. Maybe the past already let us go and we just won't accept it. Something to think about. I'm going to start listening to these Carl Jung videos. And I take my husband's suggestions very seriously because he too was broken. I mean, he's a man, but he was also broken too. He doesn't even know his dad. I never heard him really dwell on it, but he often tells me over and over again, get off the cross, somebody else needs to lumber. But I can't fully get off the cross. I love the pain. It's what fuels me. And it just dawned on me out of nowhere. We went to Wisconsin and it was a 4-hour trip up there. And I think I had some sort of revelation or something that just said, Barbs, be true to yourself. Forget about those people that don't care about you. It's okay not to be loved. It's okay not to be accepted. As long as you accept yourself. And I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it made a whole of a lot of sense to me on that 4-hour drive. So, again, sometimes a good drive with some good music or no music and just your own voice would heal all wounds or at least release the wounds that made us. I don't know. Now I'm rambling. But again, thank you. Continue to follow my journey. Again, these are my opinions and my perspective. Thank you very much.